Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and my guest today is Miss Sue Sproule. How badly did I say that?
Don't worry about it. It's Sue Sproule.
Sue Sproule. Sorry about that. We'll go with Sue from now, and you can call me Payman or
No
Peter,
problem.
whatever you remember. Sue, thank you very much for coming on, first of all. I know you're busy and you have a really good story to tell, so thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
No worries. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I don't know where to start. You want me to start with telling who I am? Is that what you would like me to do?
Yeah, I thought because you know your story really well, and I just wanted to, at the top of the hour, I wanted to give a shout out to Yak Shack. I actually found you through him, and he did a phenomenal interview with you.
Sheldon Yakichak. My interview with him of 24th of April 2024 last spring has now over 110,000 views. I hit the 1,000 views on New Year's Eve.
Wow, that's amazing.
I'm flabbergasted as well because they've tried to suppress my story so much that it's really unbelievable that finally I'm getting the exposure. And just to make sure here, it's not about me at this point. It was never just about me because I was the health and safety rep in the Air Canada Montreal call center in 2011, 2012 with all these issues started. And it's only because of that position I was holding that I'm in the situation I am today.
Okay, well, why don't you take it away? Tell us your story. You know, where were you working? How did it start? What happened, and what's happened to you so far?
Okay, just to set the table, like they say, I started in the airline industry while I was in college and as a summer job with People Express in 1985 at Mirabel Airport. That's small, but it should have been a big airport. But anyways, long story, involved also the Trudeau father in this case, Mirabel Airport fiasco. I ended up working after that for Nation Air briefly, then Canadian Airlines in 1988. That's when I started my career, like seriously, even though I was still in college and university and playing college basketball. I started the airline industry as a part-time job, dream job, passion about travel, geography, history. That's what I studied in communications. And then in 2000, Canadian Airlines got merged with Air Canada, another political fiasco. And but my career, I've never had any problems. I've received many commends, and actually the events that led to my harassment in the call center, I was nominated for Award of Excellence and Act of Bravery. So let's get right into what happened. In the year 2011, we were Air Canada call center for Quebec, the bilingual call center, the major call center where it has all the operations, meta desk, help desk, training, everything that requires bilingualism is in Montreal call center, and the National Operations Center is there as well. I was a training officer, and I was also a National Help Desk agent, senior agent, and I was doing the training of my colleagues in that department as well. I was also on the social committee, putting up Christmas decorations and things like that, and putting good ambiance in the workplace. And I was the health and safety rep. And that's where I ended up having issues with two senior directors of the Montreal call center that were basically career bullies and sexual predators. They hid their stuff fairly well, and they had their buddies that covered for them. And they managed to get through their career, whatever. I helped my colleagues. There's one that was being really harassed because we had a guy named Chris Santos that was really obsessed with women with large breasts. And she went to the union, and the union laughed at her, and they didn't do anything. So she decided to record him multiple times, put it in an MP3 format, send a copy to the union, and give them a legal notice that if you didn't do anything, that she was going to go see a lawyer. That week, she did that. The Friday, Tony disappeared. Following Monday, we learned he had left the company, retired, and moved to Portugal. And that same summer, we had our first evacuation in our Montreal call center. And what happens, why I'm talking about that, because we had 3 in total, where the one who hit the fan, basically, was the 8th of February, 2012. So between August 2011 and the 8th of February, 2012, we were on our 3rd emergency evacuation in the Montreal Air Canada call center, and we had not have an evacuation plan. Air Canada, being in the transport industry, we're ruled by federal law. But we also have to adhere to Quebec building management law. And regardless of how you want to look at it, when you have a workforce of more than 50 people in any office, any building, in any workplace, you have to have people that are trained to assist in first aid, and you also have to have an evacuation plan. We've always had one. Previously, the call centers for Air Canada were always in buildings that belonged to Air Canada. So building management and labor law were the ones handling that. For the first time in the history of Air Canada, we moved in 2009 into a building that belonged to Alembec. That's a major landlord in Quebec. And we were occupying an entire floor. We're around 200 when we moved in 2009, closer to 300, 350 by the time I left in June 2012. And so they needed an evacuation plan. It's not complicated. It's something that all workforces and workplaces around the country have in place. And Air Canada always had that as well until 2009, because the person that was the senior management in my call center was just negligent, was not interested, and didn't do his due diligence and do his job properly. And under the management of Mario Dirienzo and Bernard Milbert, that was in charge of the Health and Safety Committee, that I was the chairperson, the elected union official chairperson, I brought up these things. I said, look, guys, since 2009, we were supposed to have an evacuation plan. We don't have the proper people that are trained first aid. So they would delay. Poof, something happens. There's a storm. The generators in our basement of the building are not working properly. There was fumes that went up. There was a fire alarm. We had to go evacuate. Things didn't go well. And by law, after fact, you're supposed to have a post-mortem. You're supposed to look at what was wrong and fix it. We still didn't have an evacuation plan. Suddenly, they started getting Alembec involved. They should have just called labor or building management, and Air Canada should have handled that, poof, like that. No, they let it drag on. God forbid, November 2011, another problem, another evacuation. Again, I was on duty. All these events there, I was on duty. If I had not been on duty, things would have been handled differently. I don't know what would have happened, but anyways, I was there. The one that went really problematic was the 8th of February, 2012. I was 20 minutes away from the end of my shift. I was sitting at my help desk position. There was training classes going on, and a trainer came to see me, was standing right beside me with another employee, and they were waiting for me to finish my call because I was the only person other than the operations coordinator, because we were a Saturday, on the spot. There was no lead agents, there was no supervisor, no management, no nothing. So I finished my call. They tell me, Sue, there's a weird smell coming from the staircase, and there's a lady that's pregnant in my class, and she's not doing well. I don't know what to do. So I stepped up. I went to the door in question. I saw and smelled that there was, that rotten egg smell that you get, that means there's a gas leak somewhere. So when I realized that, my instincts kicked in. I really didn't think about it much. I closed the door. I ran right away. There was the fire alarm was like 4 meters away from the door. I pulled the alarm. I started screaming to everybody to evacuate. I took 2 of my colleagues, because that was normally the door where the smell was coming was one of 2 exits to the building. So I condemned that exit, and I sent everybody to exit our floor and exit the building because I didn't know what was going on. I just smelled the odor. I knew something was not okay, but I didn't know what was happening. So the fire department came. Normally, in every building, they have these panels in the entrance where they're supposed to have all the information for the fire department when they come, so they open these panels with master keys, and they have access to all secure areas of a building so they can go search and whatever. Nothing. There was nothing. So I had to use my key to the building and escort the firemen to try to find where the problem was. And it was in our basement. And after the fact, we found out that they had done some work in our parking lot in the basement, that they were told to ventilate the system and leave the garage doors open and everything so that the fumes of the machinery they were using in the parking lot would not seep in through to the HVAC system. Are you familiar with HVACs, Ms. Payton, how they work? And
Yeah, I am. We used to install them back in
well,
my engineering days.
so because I was the health and safety agent, I knew how our HVAC system worked in our building. That was part of my responsibilities. So I showed them where the machinery was and everything, and they had to open up everything. There was also a generator that was overheating in there. They had to shut it down. We had power outage. The call center was closed for multiple hours, I think 4 or 5 hours. A manager, the director, Mario Di Rienzo, finally showed up because we had no list of anybody in management to call. The person that was Rachel, that was at the operation center, she came to me. She said, Sue, what do we do? I said, look, pull a roster to find out who's working so that we can at least account for everybody that's working. Because being a Saturday, the other floors of our building were not occupied. They were businesses that did Monday to Friday. As Air Canada, we were 365 days a week, 7 days a week, 24-hour operation. So having Montreal call center closed for so long impacted the operation of the entire Air Canada system because the help desk was closed, the medical desk was closed, the center operation was closed. So not having the phone numbers to reach our managers is quite a negligence. And everything that happened that day fell onto me. And when my tour duty, if you want to, like my shift was over, I could have just left. But because I'm a responsible person and I was raised to do things right, I just couldn't take off. So I stayed, and I stayed till like 8, 9 o'clock that night when my shift had finished at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the manager, when he did show up, Mario, he was pissed. He told me after that I ruined his Valentine's Day date. It was the 8th of February. Valentine's was the following week, but then I found out it was his mistress. He wasn't with his wife, and today he's living with that mistress now. That is a colleague of mine. So anyways, I'm trying to put that day a little bit short and not give too much details to lose people, but it really showed how bad things were in the Montreal call center for us to be closed so long because of negligence of the landlord and negligence of the people in charge in my call center, like Mario Di Rienzo, Bernard Milbert, and all the rest of them. So that day did not go well for me because he came in, and first thing he did was charge at me, like 3 inches in my face, spitting at me and yelling at me that I ruined his day, how come everything was closed, not taking into account that the fire chief that he had just spoken to maybe 15, 20 minutes before told him, thanks to your employee, meaning me, that things were resolved and they figured out how the problem was, and that he should thank me because I only found out about this because the fire chief actually sent a letter to Air Canada after the fact to commend me. And from that, also my colleagues, they nominated me for Award of Excellence, and they nominated me also for the Act of Bravery for those events in 2012, the 8th of February. And I only found out after. And the same people in charge of the Award of Excellence are the same people that didn't do their job in February 2012. So they took my name out, and I was never given the award I should have had. And instead I was severely, harshly punished. And I was being harassed and monitored like a hawk. And they were making my life very difficult because on top of that, on the 14th of December 2012, I had fell off a step ladder putting up Christmas decorations for the social committee on my own time. We do that, in our workplace. Instead of taking our breaks and doing things, we do things for our colleagues. So I was injured. I was on pain medication. I have nerves in my leg that are pinch nerves in my butt cheek. It's called the syndrome pyramidal. It's only a surgery that can fix that. It's something I have to live with it, and many people have this. I have compressed nerves in an area that causes vibrations and electrical shocks in my leg. But I never missed any work with that injury. I continued working. I would only miss to go for physiotherapy and treatment and doctor appointments. Anyway, so they started putting a lot of pressure on me. I was being monitored. They even paid somebody paid over 70 grand a year to listen in, to be buddied to my schedule, just to listen into my calls to try to find me in the wrongdoing. They even asked my immediate supervisor, because I had an employee file this thick, and they asked her to find something.
Sorry. When you say they asked her, who's they?
Mario Di Rienzo, the actual director of North America call centers for Air Canada, asked my immediate supervisor to find something in my employee file so that they could suspend me pending discharge. They wanted me out because I had made them look bad.
Sorry for interrupting you. For the benefit of the audience, is that strictly legal or is that illegal?
That's completely illegal. He was asking another person to make up evidence or find something that could make me go through disciplinary hearings to then try to put me out of my job. And at that point in 2012, I was like 6 months away from my 25-year seniority and service anniversary. And that would guarantee me to get my pension and get my benefits, my insurance and everything. So they were trying to figure out a way to kick me out before I reach that milestone so they don't have to give me anything. And she, luckily, was a decent human being. She quit the company in 2013 after all this, by the way, and she gave me this information. She told me not only they wanted me to find something in your file, they asked me when I went back to them and I told them, look, Sue has an impeccable file. Everything is good. And she's actually the fourth in the department of the natural help desk. That's where I worked. I was the fourth in productivity of a group of 40, 50 people. And she says, how can I discipline one of my best agents? I have nothing. So they just made my life miserable, put me on shifts that were really difficult. If I had like a 4 to midnight shift because I had to go do treatment, and then I would go to my treatment before, instead of making me finish earlier to help me with my sleep and pain and everything, they'd make me work to the late hours, close the department or opening the department at 6 a.m. Because now being an employee with a injury, they were changing my schedule all the time to accommodate me for my medical appointments. I was seeing professional physio 2 or 3 times a week, and they were sending me to the Air Canada clinic also once every other week. So they put me on shifts. One week I was finishing at midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 a.m. The next week I was starting at 6 a.m. So to make my life miserable. And they succeeded. I was falling and being depressed, and I was coming home crying at least 2 to 3 times a week. My poor husband didn't know what to do with me. He'd buy me flowers. He didn't know. He wanted me to quit, and I told him I can't quit. I've invested my entire life there. I did nothing wrong. And so I stood up for myself. I stayed on. I even went to Human Resources, and I put in a formal complaint for harassment against Mario Di Rienzo and Bernard Villemer. It should have been the union, Benoit Lapointe, Ted Massa, or Leslie Diaz. And keep Leslie Diaz's name handy. I'm going to talk about her later. She's Jerry Diaz's wife, by the way. At the time, we were still CAW, and Leslie Diaz was the president. These are the people who should have went to HR, who should have formulated a complaint, or at least resolved the issues we were having in the Montreal call center, because I was not the only target here. I was just one that they really wanted out because I had the respect of my colleagues. And by doing so, now I know they often go after good employees with respected by their colleagues and superiors, because it sends a message to the other ones if they ever want to speak up. At the time, I didn't know this. I'm also the one who wrote in May 2012 our evacuation plan for the Montreal call center. It was then submitted to legal, where they changed a few punctuation, even added pictures I had taken for them, and put the whole plan out. Normally, this is something they would give out to either the labor department to do or to an outside firm, and they pay between 5 and 10 grand to get an emergency plan put in place in large workplaces. I did it in 3 days in English and in French in May 2012. They had given me the week off to do this, and they had postponed doing this for like almost a year, and they were supposed to have one in place since 2009. So they decided she can do the employee. They thought they were going to crush me by putting me in charge of doing that thing. They gave me a week off. I had it done in 3 days, and they were so upset that I only took 3 days to do it. But I'm not going to lie. I took the work home. I worked more than just my 8 hours on this a day, because I wanted it to be over with and I wanted it to be handled. So they hid me in an office for the 2 extra days that they had taken me off my normal duties to do this. And I was in a closed room reading up on policies and procedures, preparing for my next shift that would have been the following week. So I basically was sitting in a room doing nothing, because they didn't want to look bad, because it took me 3 days to do something they had not been doing for over 5 years. Then after that, they called in a company called Kishil's Consulting from Mississauga. At the time, I didn't know who they were. And now I know that they conducted between 2010 and 2012, 24 external investigations across the Air Canada system: Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary or Winnipeg, I'm sorry, I can't remember, Montreal and Halifax. And all 24 external investigations Kishil Consulting was involved with all concluded to the same, that Air Canada had a systemic harassment problem. My own investigation started, I was interviewed by this lady, I forgot her last name, I'm sorry, in 13 of June 2012. And the next day, I had my control medical appointment for my injury for my leg that I fell. And I showed up at my doctor's office completely crying. I hadn't slept in many days, almost in a week, because of the stress of this investigation and the repercussions. And they were threatening me: Sue, are you sure you want to go through this? Do you want to withdraw your complaint? You know that if the investigation comes out against you, you lose everything. You have not made your 25-year. Do you want us to, this is the union talking, by the way. Do you want us to negotiate? Maybe you should retire, leave, whatever. So all these things started to pop up alarm bells in my head.
Let me clarify something. So now we have 4 actors. We have yourself. Mm-hmm. We have Canadian Airlines West, CAW.
It was the Canadian Auto Workers Union that is now Unifor.
Sorry. So I misunderstood. So there's you, there's your employer, there's your union, and then there's this outside investigative.
Yeah.
So how do those all tie in together? The union's supposed to represent you, has nothing to do with the investigation?
Exactly. The union should have steered this investigation and should also have been the ones calling in who was going to testify and be a witness. They had 80 people. The company had 80 people in my call center interviewed by this in Cashel Consulting. The only people I was allowed to ask to be witnesses was 4 or 5 people, the people who had seen what had happened to me on the day of the 8th of February. But the company brought in a bunch of people that were my colleagues that I worked with. Some were managers, some were unionized employees, but all the people that should have been called in were not, like my union rep, like my colleague union reps, like our district chairperson, like my lead agent in my department, the help desk, as my leader, as my team leader in the training department, all the people that would have been good for me were not asked to be involved in this investigation. It was all a bunch of people, anyways, 80 colleagues. 2 of them in the year after that, when I was gone, called me and told me they were asked to lie and make up stuff, but when they came in front of the investigator, they did not do what they were asked to do, and they said the truth. And what came out in my investigation, that is that I was extremely respected by my peers, that I was a trustworthy agent, that I was also a very knowledgeable, helpful, anyways, only good things, basically. Yep.
They were asked to lie to the investigators. Asked by who?
Mario Di Rienzo et Bernard Milbert.
The big supervisor guy?
The director and the senior director. Yeah. And 2 of them were friends with these gentlemen and had been hired at the beginning of their career with them and were lifelong party buddies and travel buddies and whatever. And one of them, an elderly gentleman, he's passed away from cancer now. His name is Louis. God rest his soul. He actually came to me when I visited the call center as part of my trauma therapy things to go back to the workplace to try to work. I was still thinking I was going to go back to my job at that time. I bumped into him. He took me aside. He grabbed my hand. He looked me in the eyes and he told me, I know that you did nothing wrong. I was asked as your agency help desk lead agent, chef d'équipe, we call it, to say things that I decided I was not going to participate in that. I said the truth. You're a good employee. You're a good human being. And stay how you are. And with time, things will be okay. Don't worry. And that was pretty much the interaction I had with him at the time. I visited him in the hospital because he had pancreatic cancer. And he's no longer there, but he was one of them. There was another 2 ladies that were on the committee for the Award of Excellence that advised me that Bernard, that was in charge of the Award of Excellence program in the Montreal Call Center, told them that I was not eligible to be part of the selection for Montreal Call Center because I was on sick leave. So they took me out, and I had been the one who had received the record nominations for the Act of Bravery and Award of Excellence for an ordinary unionized employee in a call center. The record nominations. That means a lot of them had, in my call center, my colleagues had nominated me without me knowing that. And I finally got a letter of conclusion from Cashel Consulting with a little bit of the 20th of July, 2012, Air Canada management and union had a copy of the 28 pages of this investigation already in hand. And they hid it until a judge of the Workers' Compensation Board in Quebec called CNSST ordered them to give me a copy. All I had was a letter dated November 2012 that was a photocopy of a conclusion letter. And there was a few paragraphs on there. And one paragraph, the most important, I know it by heart, said, due to the preponderance of the evidence, I've concluded that Mrs. Susan Sproule was subject to workplace harassment, workplace conflict, and a poison work environment. That was darker black, in a larger font in the paragraph. Yeah, exactly. So when I finally got that in my hands and I read it, I cried my life because I was warned that if the investigation concluded to false accusations, I was going to lose everything and they would sue me. So I decided to go ahead anyways, taking the risk, not evaluating what I was getting myself into because I had no idea at the time. I was just doing my civic duty. I would have done the same thing if I had been on the street and I saw fires coming out of a building. I would have went and helped like normal people do. But this happened to be my workplace on top of it. So of course, as the health and safety representative, as the training officer, and I gave training also to how to handle fire extinguishers and how to evacuate.
Sorry, you said that if something happened, they would turn around and sue you. What
Mhm.
would be the justification for a company suing an employee?
That's now I know it's their tactic. The union, Benoit Lapointe, Leslie Diaz, and their lawyer, Louis Gottheil, told me many times through this process to be very careful what I say and the names I'm naming, because I could be sued for defamation and libel. So when they started talking to me in this way, I took upon myself to go educate myself. I went to the government websites, to Justice Canada websites, and I went to look up libel and defamation and what it entailed and everything. And basically, out of all the thousands of pages I've read, as long as I'm saying the truth, they can't do anything to me. So I decided I was not going to stay silent. I decided that too many of my colleagues have been sexually harassed, have professionally been harassed. I know of two women. One was raped at Dorval Airport. And she trusted the union. They took the person that was in management. They just moved him to a different area, and he's still working, as far as I know, even today. My manager, the director of the Montreal North America call centers, Mario Di Rienzo, had sexual relationships with many women in my call center throughout his career and had inappropriate you don't do that with subordinates in a workplace. And he even bragged about it to other men in my call center. It came out in my external investigation. The men in my call center that were asked to testify that they thought would say bad things about me actually were said things about them. They said, look, Mario even bragged that he slept with this one, this one, this one, and this one, and he can sleep with anyone he wants in this call center. That came out in my investigation. I was not complaining about that. I was just complaining in my investigation that we had two senior management, one being the call center director, that had an inappropriate behavior, number one, and also was harassing and putting pressure on me because I was doing my job too well. That's basically what I was told by another manager. Sue, you are disturbing because you're loud, you take space, and you're knowledgeable, and you're qualified. And that intimidates people who are not doing their jobs as they should. And even though some of my colleagues may or may not like me or not, that's irrelevant. Nobody would say that I was not a qualified, a resourceful, and also very helpful colleague. And I took great pride in being a good employee, and I still do. And it's why it hurts when I have to say I'm an ex-employee of Air Canada, because I don't feel I'm an ex-employee. That was my life, my career. I could have done a lot of other jobs after I finished my education. I stayed there. In 1991, I even accepted a post to go work in Iqaluit, Northwest Territories. I had 22 grand in student loan debt, and I took that position and I stayed there almost 4 years until the base closed. And up there also, I was the training agent, the health and safety agent. We were only 8 employees running the base, but still. And I took immense pride in working for Canadian Airlines and Air Canada and the career I had and helping the customers and everything. And I didn't really care that things like this could happen because I never seen it. And then when I realized that even my own union used me, I was a DEI basically of my time because I was a French Canadian woman from Quebec. So my union used me to look good. They put me on committees, they put me on boards. I was even in charge of the biannual Health and Safety Environmental Committee at Port Elgin for CAW, that is now Unifor. So I really thought I was contributing to something. I really thought I was part of a team. I really thought I was a good human until they decided I wasn't. And once you're tagged by management as a nuisance, you're tagged now to be destroyed. That I did not know. I didn't know either at the time that we were 467 employees unionized at the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. How did I find out about that? Is in 2017, part of the ordeal I went through. I was waiting for my arbitration that was technically planned for the 1st and 2nd of November 2017. And they started offering me 1-year salary retirement, 2-year salary retirement, 3-year salary retirement. And each time I was telling them, why are you not letting me go back to work? As per all the doctor's evaluation, all the psychiatric evaluations you put me through, all the WCB, CNSST for Quebec, but I'd rather use the word WCB because the English speaking of Canada won't have any idea what the CNSST is, other than people in Quebec. So all these things were in my favor. I had an external investigation in my favor. I had 10 psychiatric evaluations done on me by the company, the union, the WCB. I had been put through rehabilitation programs. I had been through so much, and all these things, they were being told, you have to take this employee back, give her a progressive return to work, give her favorable conditions so she can reintegrate her job and the position she had. But the union and the company, they work together. They don't tell you that. And I'm telling you, now, almost 14 years, in June, this coming June, will be 14 years. I've now realized all Canadian unions, not just Unifor, they're criminal organizations that are complicit to the destruction of workers' rights in Canada. All of them, not just Unifor.
Let's pause it there. I just want to go to some audience comments, questions, and I want to come back to that union thing because one of the audience comments is about that. So the first one is Mr. Kirk Reese. Love how she says how it is. Awesome for standing up and sharing. So I don't know if you know Mr. Reese. He's also a military whistleblower, and he got screwed over as well.
The name means something because to be able to come and speak publicly like I am in the last year is because I was following other whistleblowers and everything that's been happening in the last 4 years in the COVID. It all validated and proved to me what has been currently happening in our society. And by listening to other whistleblowers, like I'm more familiar with the ones in Quebec. I don't know if you know about Patrick Provost. He's a university teacher of Université Laval. He questioned the entire pandemic stuff that happened in 2020. He's been put through the ringer and he lost his job, his career, his financial means and everything as well. But a guy that came out of jail last year for pedophilia got to be able to still continue teaching at a Université Laval, but Professor Provost, he can't. Then you got an ex-lawyer, Gloriane Blais, and I now am one of her allies, and I help her with interviews in English and all kinds of stuff. And everything I do, by the way, I do it for free. I'm not working. I have a little job for my cousins that gives me a little bit of money right now, but I mean, it's more, that job is more like a rehab for me to get me out of the house because I became really reclusive and not leaving my house much. And I watched the grass grow and the snow fall for a very, very long time. But by putting myself out there and by going on X, because that's the only place I got visibility is on X, by the way, because Facebook, I gave some interviews with some bloggers that are on Facebook in 2018-19, even a UK media that's in London, and they all got censored. The content is not available in Canada. And then even my interview with Sheldon Yakichak, I can put the link in a post, but it will not transfer automatically. And after a while, sometimes they even disappear my page. And so X became the only place I had a voice. So I started telling people what I've been through and answering posts like I did on yours. And then you came and asked me questions, like Sheldon Yakichuk last year one day was talking about unions and how unions had failed the workers during COVID. And we know why, because now we know unions work hand in hand with the employers and the government. Just look at Jerry Diaz. That's Leslie Diaz's husband. He was the president of Unifor. Currently, it's Lana Payne, the ex-secretary. So they only shuffle themselves around. Jerry Diaz is still the boss behind the scenes. It's just that we don't know that. And Leslie is still at the National. That's his wife. And he was caught giving a bribe of $50,000 in a paper bag to another union official because they were imposing on all union members, if you don't take the vaccine, you're out the door. Right at that moment in 2020, when Unifor took that position, it should have been enough for a revolt. The duty to represent of any union is to stand up for workers' rights.
It's I'm going to bring up another comment totally related to that. This is Mr. R.B. Ham. I believe he ran for office. As someone who was abandoned by my union during the COVID insanity, I can confirm that unions today have more allegiance to government diktats than fighting for the rights of workers. That caught my attention. I thought maybe you'd want to comment on that.
Look, it's obvious now that our Canadian unions, and by the way, Unifor is the largest private sector union. QP, Mr. Han there, LGBT Mr. Han, Mr. Pro-Hamas Mr. Han, is the largest public sector union. So that means they control all our public servants. And when I go back to Unifor, the really shady shit, I'm sorry, I promised my mother to have a eloquent and distinguished and respectful language, but sometimes there's no words for others than that. Unifor is a criminal organization. They had in 2019 their national convention at the Fairmont Hotel in Quebec City, and the entire Liberal Party of Canada was their guest. Trudeau spoke at their convention, and also Trudeau gave $600 million to a board that Jerry Diaz was the president of the board to distribute to the medias. I thought that was freakish odd until I realized that our entire Canadian press industry is unionized with Unifor. This is like a movie. You're putting the mafia in charge of...
Just to back up, Jerry Diaz is the president of Unifor?
Currently, he's technically retired, and he apologized because he had lack of judgment, because he takes painkillers for an injury. He has sciatic nerve problems. And because he takes pain medication, I've taken pain medication for over 13 years. That was his way out to say, oh, I lack judgment. And I made a mistake of giving a bribe of $50,000 to another union member. I'm going to retire now because I'm sick. And he got a double dipping pension. He gets his pension from the auto workers industry, a job that he never occupied because he was always a union rep and a union delegate and then a union president. And he gets one also paid by the membership for doing corruption against the membership. So I financed his pension while mine has been stolen from me illegally, and nobody believes me. I have been deleted out of the Air Canada database. I no longer exist in the Air Canada world, like I've never worked there. And I have a pension plan I contributed to since the 3rd March of 1988. And I have nothing to show for. And it's as illegal as if I have money in the bank and I decided to walk into my bank and take money out of my bank account, and I was kicked out by the security guard telling me you're not going to get your money. That's exactly the same thing. I called the RCMP fraud department in 2019 about that. I took down the name of the officer, but he hung up on me. They basically told me it was a civil case, to get myself a lawyer and to fight it in the civil courts. So I need to find a lawyer willing to fight Air Canada to get my own freaking money.
Okay, let's one moment. We'll come to your pension issue. Going back to Unifor, this guy, he's leading Unifor, which is a private sector union,
Yep.
and then he's on another board that the Prime Minister of Canada gives $600 million to him to
Distribute
manipulate
to the
media.
Canadian medias, yes.
Yeah, but let's call it what it is. It's to manipulate media, basically to
Oh,
media the state
look, our
media.
Canadian media, I'm confirming to you and anybody watching that our Canadian media is totally under the control of Unifor. I've had friends working the industry that tell me the truth in private. They've made me swear never to give their names or where they work, how they have this information, but they've showed me paperwork I've seen with my own eyes that prove that our media industry is a propaganda arm of our Canadian government. They even have a department of the Liberal government that is the liaison officer to the union, Unifor, and to the Canadian medias. All the journalists, mainstream journalists in Canada, are unionized with Unifor.
So how would that work in by the way, Arnold Haino, PPC candidate, he said, how is it that unions are representing government employees? But how does that work in practice? So Justin Trudeau gives $600 million, and Unifor, if a journalist steps out of line, Unifor goes and steals their pension?
Look, how come there's no stories like mine in the mainstream media? I'm not unique, huh? I'm just one of so many. The difference between other victims and me is I have communication skills because of my experience working for Air Canada for so long, and for also working for CAW and Unifor for so long. I got tools in my toolbox that I was trained and formatted my entire life to be at the service of my employer, Air Canada. And now I'm using these tools to expose the shady parts and the things that are hidden within Air Canada and Unifor. Because until this happened to me, and Peyton, I'm saying this out of humble and humility, I would have never believed my own story if I hadn't lived it. I had to tell friends of mine, do you realize that this is not only happening to me, but this happened to Kim, this happened to Billy, this happened to Denis, this happened to Joe, this happened to Rod, this happened to Colette, to Christine, to me. There's 3 suicides that I'm aware of that happened 2020, 2021. Nowhere in the news we ever heard about any suicides. There's a woman in Toronto in 2018 that died in a public washroom at Pearson Airport. She was going to go into a meeting for disciplinary action because she was late to her shift. And while she was dead in the bathroom stall at Pearson Airport for 6 hours, they didn't know where she was. They had already drafted a suspension and a termination letter, and she was already dead. And nobody realized that she was missing. It took 6 hours and 2 cleaning crews to go in, open the door. They thought she was resting on the floor of the bathroom.
Just to be clear, I wasn't doubting what you were saying. I'm just trying to, for the audience, like, how would put ourselves in their position. These unions they swear to defend the rights of their members, and yet they have more allegiance to the government. Like, how did we get there?
I don't know how did we get there. I had Benoit Lapointe, who was also a colleague, and he was at my wedding with his husband, at the time was his boyfriend in 2006. We worked together on different committees for CAW. He was the district chair throughout it started with Ted Massa, another useless union rep. And on Ted Massa, he is the one who should have put in this complaint. The harassment problems we were having in Montreal, because they weren't unique only to the Montreal call center, they were happening at the Dorval airport also. And he was the district chair at the time. And this guy got his full pension when he has been caught 3 times frauding the company. And all 3 times he was able to retain his job. And I, an impeccable employment, 30 years plus employee, was canned because she didn't want to submit and sign to a non-disclosure and cover up what was going on. And there's Benoit Lapointe that took his place, that won the elections after that, that steered my dossier, if you want. He looked me in the eyes and told me that I had to play the game, that I didn't know how negotiation worked, that I was not going to get everything I was owed, and that I would have to take losses for standing up and not following their instructions. They were very disappointed that I contacted medias, government officials, and the Canadian Commission of Human Rights. That's how I was treated by my own peers and the people I trusted. He tried to manipulate me, coerce me under redress to accept the unacceptable. He came to my house, talked to my husband, tried to tell my husband that his wife should have listened to him and do these things. This is how low, crooked they are. While I trusted them, until I saw for myself and I read rulings in arbitration, conclusions and stuff like that, and I had to see it with my own eyes, I still believe them. They told me I was in a unique, complex case, when actually there was nothing unique about it, and there was nothing complex about it. That's how they frame everything. And because all the victims end up signing non-disclosure agreements, they can go out and mouth out saying that there is no issues like that happening, there is no victims, there's nobody speaking out. I have spoken to so many of my colleagues that have signed non-disclosures. Some of them have told me and given me permission to talk about them without giving their names. Some others gave me permission to give their names. And some others that have signed non-disclosure even told me the day you get your court date, if you are able to get the judge or the commissioner, depending where I'm going to be heard, to waive the non-disclosure they're signed, they're going to come and testify for me. I have 2 that have committed to it and 2 others that say, depending on the situation, that they would consider breaking their non-disclosure to help us. And I was fortunate to meet 2 very courageous colleagues, Billy Harlow and Kim. Kim, I won't give you her last name, but if it's fairly easy to find, I've testified in her case. It's KS versus Air Canada. It's in the Canley database, and it's dated 2018 and 2019. I even went to Toronto 3 times, and I testified in her case. I was supposed to be a 15-minute yes-no testimony, and I was warned by her lawyer and not to talk about my case, that they had made a deal with Air Canada lawyers, that I was only there as a witness because I was a training officer in the Montreal call center, and Air Canada's major defense in her case was they did not have another job for her. She used to work on the ramp in Toronto, and she had been harassed, horribly harassed, and she left the company in 2013, and she's an extremely intelligent and smart woman, and she's my ally now. She's helping me doing my paperwork, because my case now is in English and French. Being in Quebec, part of it is in French. The other part, being working for Air Canada, it's English, and what concerns the Canadian human rights, everything's in English. So I'm stuck and struggling using documents and evidence that's in both Canadian languages. and trying to find a lawyer to represent me is, I only have a jurist in Quebec now, and I've only had this man since last spring. And he's already put forward 4 or 5 legal procedures, and all of them have been ignored. And I have another lawyer, the same as Kim has. He's in Hamilton. He's the one handling my human rights case. And he only recently was able to put forward my complaint. And it's only on the 30th of October last year that my rebuttal to the Air Canada rebuttal has been put forward. And I want to say something about that. In the rules of the Canadian Human Rights Commissions, when you formulate a formal complaint against anybody on a human rights case, one of the rules that I had overlooked, I hadn't missed that, and obviously my lawyer also missed that, is you have to do your original submission in 3 pages only, maximum. That makes it really difficult to submit a lot of evidence. How can you explain in 3 pages being abused for over 13? That was very difficult, but we figured out a way, and we reformulated, and it was actually accepted. You know how many pages Air Canada filed to my 3 pages? 63. 63 pages of lies. And what hurt me the most, or insulted me the most, or I find the most outrageous at this time, is the person who signed those 63 pages to the Canadian Commission about my complaint is very well aware of who I am. She's the sister of someone I've worked with over 25 years. And that person she works for HR. She's a long-term employee of Air Canada. A nice person. I know her. She's the one who put her signature on it and submitted those 63 pages of lies. I have a hard time understanding how other colleagues, other humans are capable of doing things like that, knowing it's wrong, knowing it's lies. They're basically prostituting themselves for a paycheck, even though they know it's wrong. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw her name on those papers, those 63 pages.
It's a lack of integrity.
Big time. And I know she knows about me. I know, and her sister's on my Facebook. She's friends with me on Facebook. I could have went and banned her and blocked her, but I decided, no, I'm not going to be embarrassed for doing the right thing. Although I do find it extremely humiliating and dehumanizing what I've been put through, what I'm still being put through, because I've been without revenues since the 14th of September 2015. And even though I am destitute, if you want to look at it that way, I'm one of the lucky ones. I have a husband, I have family, I have friends that never abandoned me and still support me and are there for me. As most of my colleagues, I think of Billy and many others, they lost their homes, their spouses, their children's relationships have been damaged too, because the psychiatric process that we've been put through is so difficult that we are perceived by people as crazy. And I really hate the tags that are put on people like me. Like currently, the legal process I've been through, I am technically by law a person with a 5% mental disability. They argued in court for 3 days with that psychiatric doctors, trying to determine if I was a 5, a 10, or a 15% person with a mental disability. All while I'm there listening to this. My sister, my aunt, my friend, my cousins are there listening to this. They even put me through an IQ test where I had to do subtractions starting at 105 minus 7 timed with a promo to try to figure out if I was intelligent enough. They made me identify.
Did you say 105 times 7?
No, they started at 105, and you have to do subtractions of 7 in a
Oh,
1 minute.
that's so difficult. I can do a subtraction of 1, but 7 is just that's
No,
difficult.
but I did it. And actually, the only thing that came out in that freaking tribunal, Tribunal Administratif du Travail, and this psychiatric doctor called Jean-Marc, Marc-André Laliberté, he works for neuroscience. He's basically a paid doctor to do evaluations for corporations and to put, he did 4 evaluations on me, by the way, This man declared in court that I was a woman that suffered a PTSD at the age of 7 when my father passed, and that I had a miserable life, that I had all kinds of family history, mental illness. He even went and said under oath that my mother was bipolar. She was dying of cancer at the time. And I come from a political family that's part of the Canadian history. My great-grandfather was the 6th Prime Minister of Quebec, Honorable Alfred Mousseau. My mom's cousin, Jérôme Choquette, was the Minister of Justice under Bourassa, and he's the one who instilled our Quebec Charter of Rights. And now, whatever years later, I'm stuck in this system where I followed all the laws, all the rules, was expected of me my entire life. I even file my income tax reports, even though they say 0.00. And the only thing I give my husband as a credit on his income tax is that he saves $2,500 of taxes because I'm his dependent. But I still have to file individually my income tax because by law, I have to remain in good standing with the Canadian Revenue Agency, even though I have no revenues. Everything is meant to make your life miserable. Everything is made so that the victims cannot get justice in the system. And then through this process, I found out that when we go through the CNESST in Quebec, the equivalent of the WCB in the rest of Canada, they take away our rights to sue the employer, and the judgments we end up with, although by law and spirit of the law, they are expected to abide by them, they're non-binding. So I had a ruling of the Tribunal Tribunal Administratif du Travail of Quebec that says that they have to take me back in my position, give me favorable conditions, and a planned return to work with my medical and Air Canada's medical professionals. And they decided
Can
it's
I
not going
ask,
to happen.
what is the Human Rights Tribunal? Like, why would citizens not go through civil, like the court system?
Um, when you're unionized, that's one of the problems. If I had not been unionized from the get-go, I could have gotten myself a lawyer and I could have handled this case with a lawyer. But being unionized, and although my collective agreement at the time did permit me to get myself an independent representative, and why I'm saying at the time is because since then, Unifor has made sure to remove that clause from our current collective agreement that as unionized employees, we can't even go and get ourselves independent representation. We have no choice but to go through the union. And that's what also prolonged my journey and abuse, because even the commission in 2017, when I contacted them, I was still in the process of the union legalities and evaluations and steps and whatever. And they told me until I had expired all my legal process with the union, that I had no case for the commission. But for some reason, the lady that took my call in the spring of 2017, she sent a letter to Air Canada, to the CEO, and it was Colin Revenescu at the time still. and to the president of the union, Jerry Diaz, that was still the president of Unifor at the time. And they told them that they had to respect my human rights and that I had favorable judgments and that they should put in place what those judgments say. They ignored it. And then they found out I had been calling medias because I never hid myself. I told the union I was not going to play any games. Everything I'm telling you is all things my employer, the legal department, the lawyers, the union, they all know. I told them in arbitration during my own testimony when I was finally able to testify in my own name, because I was not given my voice until 2018 in front of an arbitrator called Mr. Brian Keller, and I testified for 4 hours on that afternoon of summer, July 2018. I told them if we cannot come to a humane resolution of this process, that I was willing to participate to fix all this, but they had to treat me with dignity and respect like any other human is allowed to expect, right? I told the lawyers, there were 6 lawyers on the Air Canada side, and I had 3 on my side. We had Louis Gottheil, Benoit Lapointe, and Leslie Diaz, Jerry Diaz's wife. I told them, and I looked at them, and I looked at the arbitrator, Mr. Brian Keller. I said, if they don't treat me in a humane way, I'm willing to go to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal and at the Supreme Court of Canada if I have to, not knowing that really, in reality, there is no justice in Canada. The whole system is made for you to fail or that you're out of delay of prescription. And what is the delay of prescription? Imagine, even from the beginning in 2012, I could have had a criminal case against Bernard and Mario. I had been pushed in the staircases by Bernard and spat on by him, and Mario also. So if I had been, and I went to the cops and put a criminal complaint against that, I would have had a criminal case. But when I realized that what they had done to me was actually considered a criminal fact, I was out of delay of prescription. I had 6 months only to go to the police to make a complaint. So now, because we were years after and my union didn't do what they were supposed to do, poof, I don't have a criminal complaint either. Then I find out that the tribunal rulings are non-binding. The juge Goyette that oversaw my case, I really had hope in that lady because I really listened to her and I felt she gave me a voice during my 2-week trial, if you want to call it, at the commission. But I should have woken up to one instance that happened during that. And I have it all on records. I have recordings of everything. So anything I say, I have the proof of it, by the way. During the audience, they hired Lucie Guimont from Henderson Gosling, one of the a big firm. They used to be associated to Heen and Blakely, and now they're all at Henderson Gosling. And at one point during my hearing, something pops up, and she starts going wackadoodle, if you want. She starts saying, whoa, we can't open this Pandora box here. If not, Benoit Lapointe and Mr. Gottheil and Mr. Cote, they're all going to have to get independent representation, and they're going to have to get another lawyer for Mrs. Sproule. Do you want to go there? So suddenly, Judge Goyette presses the button, stops the recording of the audience. She asks for a suspension. They all disappear in a back room. They all go talk for 15, 20 minutes. They all come back, start the recording, and start it again like nothing happened. The Pandora box is I was aware already at the time that there were multiple people already at the Canadian Human Rights with complaints, and they didn't want to open that door during my hearing. And it's Kim that did the Access to Information Act in 2016. Her first demand, she got that there was over 2,400 and something complaints against Air Canada. But she made her demand at first with something that was too out large. So she reformulated her Access to Information demand, this time asking how many complaints for harassment only. So as the 31st of December 2013, that's when she found out 465. So with her case and my case, there's at least 467. I suspect there's a lot more because I know it's still going on, but I cannot say the number because I would have to make another access to information to find out the updated number from 2016. But I'm waiting to find out if my case is going to be heard. And once I get my own tribunal date, then that's when I'm going to remake a formulation and a demand to access to information to find out how many are currently still pending for harassment for Air Canada. And that's how I know we're 467.
So,
And
sorry, I just have one question. I want to go back to this. When you join a union, I know your rules have changed, but typically when you join a union, you forfeit your right to outside counsel. The union is supposed to represent you. When you say you couldn't go through civil court, is that because it's the union wouldn't go to civil court on your behalf?
Exactly.
Okay. So sorry to cut you off. The Canadian Human Rights Commission, that's basically there. I don't know, like a stopgap or to give you at least an avenue when your union turns on you.
Yes, but even that, because I found, even though my case is solid, they have nothing against me. My termination was an administrative termination. 28 pages with Mr. Brian Keller, where he says that because my union presented the wrong article of my collective agreement, that he has no choice but to acquiesce to the employer's decision to terminate my employment administratively. Bingo, that's it. That's all. They reduced the scope. Instead of having an arbitration on the 1st and 2nd of November 2018, they turned my arbitration into a hearing of scope. I didn't understand what it was at first. Basically, they're in front of the arbitrator or the judge or whatever you want to call it, and they're debating case law and legal precedents to reduce what can be heard in my case. They reduce the scope of my hearing, my arbitration, that my harassment wasn't even talked about, that the subsequent retaliation events, none of them were talked about. They even cut off my insurance in 2016 while I was on hard medication for a long time. They cut my insurance off. You're not allowed to cut somebody's insurance off until they've been terminated, their employment. That's the last thing you lose as a unionized employee is your insurance. They cut off my insurance on the 31st of January 2016 while I was still awaiting to go into the administrative tribunal, while I was still waiting to go to arbitration. And they also sent me my first, when you leave an employment, they send you this thing that you can go to EI with it. I have a blank here.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I forget what it's called.
It's not your letter of termination. It's your let go papers. You're supposed to get your 4% with that and everything. My apologies. So they basically termination. Man, it's you go to EI with that when you want to go get unemployment. It's your.
It's like an employee record. I've filled it out before. Yeah.
Yeah, they sent me one of those in January 2016 saying left employment. That was with the reason on the bottom there where they put the reason.
Here we go. Record of employment. Yeah.
Yeah. So they wrote down that I left employment. I was waiting for an arbitration. I was waiting for going to the administrative tribunal. They cut off my insurance and they send me this by mail, by FedEx, saying that I'm terminated. It's like your employment termination. Fudge. Sometimes I get
I think it's called record of employment. By the way, you might want to follow Corinne Morey. She's tracking all of the BC nurses unions here.
Oh, I've spoken to so many nurses in Quebec that are being watched, monitored. I even have a friend. She's a friend now, Dominique. She was a coordinator just before COVID as a nurse in a huge place, and she was sent for courses that were given by McKinsey firm. The McKinsey firm that every government and provincial, federal, and others around the world are using, that it's a Boston firm, a political lobbyist firm. They're the ones running the show of our Quebec government and probably a big part of our federal Canadian government too. But she went to classes given by them where she was going to have to put in place things that she thought were unethical before COVID was even declared. And today she's a whistleblower. She's having a hard time. I've spoken to Ken Pereira. Maybe you heard about him also. Ken Pereira is a whistleblower of the union FTQ construction work in Quebec. There was a whole commission on the construction industry in Quebec in 2013. He was one of their major whistleblowers. I have a lot of respect for this man. He lost everything just like me. Credibility, had to move out, was threatened, his life and everything, because the construction industry unions are mafia as well. And actually, their buildings are like 5-minute walks from my house right here on St. Denis Street in Montreal. And I had a banner in front of my house in 2019 that was part of an article the Huffington Post did about me and 4 of my colleagues, 20th of June 2018. Journalist Emilie Clavel. I am very grateful to that young lady that took our story, because there's no media, mainstream media, that was willing to take our stories, even though I had all the proof, and she did. It took her 3 months, though, to make sure that everything that she put in her article could not be deemed as possible to be sued by Air Canada, because they're very, very powerful. And I understand now a little bit more why. The Canadian government also owns about 20% shares in Air Canada. All the politicians of Canada are VIPs of Air Canada. They get privileges for travel with Air Canada. So everybody is, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Everybody's in bed together. Everybody works together. And people like me are looked upon as enemies, as criminals, are treated like criminals when they're actually honorable people. And I've been in contact with so many that told me their stories, and we're all treated the same. It doesn't matter what our stories and what we've been through and what our careers are and what the positions we occupied, what jobs we had. As soon as we question the status quo, as soon as our moral ethics kick in and we refuse to participate in the illusion of what their desires are, that's when they go after us, and they go after us and they retaliate very, very harshly. They almost had me. I put the that I where I am right now is because I have strong faith in God. I have had a excellent education. I have a good family. My mother, she's passed away since the 5th of November 2017, 3 days after my fake arbitration. I lied to her on her deathbed because she was suffering. She had stayed alive longer than any person in her situation. She had a cancer, carcinoma ethmoidal infiltrant. The normal standards for that type of cancer was 1 year of life expectancy. And she survived 4 years, 10 months, 15 days longer than she was supposed to. She went through 60 something chemotherapy treatments and radiotherapy treatments. And she was my biggest fan, supporter, inspiration, and guide. And I still feel her every day as I'm doing what I'm doing today, trying to help others, giving a voice to all the voiceless, giving a voice to all the ones who were silenced with non-disclosures, that are suffering, because if they dare to speak out, they're going to be sued and lose more money than the small pittance they received for signing the non-disclosure.
So I'll say I'm sure your mom, wherever she is, she's looking down. She's proud of what you're doing. So good for you.
I hope I'm honoring her memory. I hope I'm honoring every single person that has been put through what we have been put through. My voice is not only for me, but it's for every single woman, girl, and man that have been abused and have been discarded like garbage, when in reality, they were honorable enough to stand up to what was right. And their only thing that you can put against them is that they trusted the instances and the institutions and the people that were meant to protect us. And I'm saying this really strongly. We have in Canada all kinds of laws, groups, organizations, charities that brag out large to being protectors of women's rights, protectors of human rights, justice, and all that. And none of them would get wet and help me because they said my case was now politically motivated, and that because the government is really close to Air Canada, because Unifor is a mafia really close to the government as well, that it will cost so much money to take me on pro bono or on to these organizations that they don't have the financial means to support me or my case to bring it to light. I tried, like in Quebec, we have an ombudsman type of thing that's called the Protecteur du Citoyen. This is an organization that's financed by my tax dollars in Quebec. And this organization is supposed to be a gatekeeper for the laws and things in Quebec as your last instance to go when the system has failed you. I am barred from the Protecteur du Citoyen on Facebook and even on Twitter. The same thing goes with the CNSST, like if the WCB would bar me. Actually, the WCB, I comment on their postings often. They have not blocked me, but anything related to Quebec, I've been blocked. I reached out. We are like a group of 4 or 5 people since 2018 trying to get political allies. I reached out to Maxime Bernier, Pierre Poilievre. I spoke in person. I met Mr. Scheer in Montreal, December 2019, after they lost the last elections. I helped the Conservative candidate in my riding. My riding's Papineau, Justin Trudeau's riding. I'm a lifelong Liberal, and I could not vote for this clown, criminal, evil man anymore, although I did vote for him in 2015 and after. But as of 2019, I could no longer vote for the Liberals. And I had in 2019 that banner in front of my house that was 10 feet by 13 feet. I reached out to every political candidate, and only Sophie Veilleux, who was running against Justin Trudeau in Papineau in 2019, actually rang my doorbell and answered me. She came over with provincial Conservative people, and they came to my house. I made them coffee and even offered them Portuguese bakery goodies. And I explained to them everything I was going through. I volunteered my time to campaign with Madame Sophie Veilleux. And I had been before involved in politics as a, what they call them, bénévolat.
Canvasser, campaigner, door knocker.
Yeah, door knocker, but I had participated in provincial and municipal as an observer, a volunteer observer, like to the integrity of the process. I had been asked to do that many times in the past. And this time around, I was like following Sophie all around and everything and going to the stations. And I helped collect the data on the day of the polls and everything. And I voted Conservative for the first time in my life in 2019. And I didn't vote Conservative. I voted for the candidate, the human being called Sophie Veilleux. And after that, she got me an interview with Mr. Scheer in Montreal, where they had their assembly after the elections of 2019. And Charlie, his office secretary or whatever person that's always with him, gave me his personal card. He looked me in the eyes, Mr. Scheer. He listened to me for 25 minutes with Sophie Veilleux next to me. He thanked me. He said he was going to get back to me. He spoke to Charlie. He said, Charlie, you're going to call Mrs. Sproule and we'll try to help her. I've never had any news from any of them. I also was in contact with the federal office of Justin Trudeau, and I was talking to Thomas Marchand, and to Lawrence, his human rights person. They have all my paperwork. They've had all my paperwork since 2017. I never thought that I was dealing with something as evil as corruption is, and at the level we're dealing in the country currently. I knew things were not right. I knew corruption in government existed, but I didn't think it was this bad. But through the experience I've been through, I had to put in everything I ever thought. I had to rethink, and I don't believe in anything anymore. I'm really sorry. I see everything as a scam now. I see everything as corrupt. Yes, they're going to say this lady has PTSD. Yes, I do have PTSD. Yes, I'm hyper vigilant, but I have a reason to be. Once a month or twice a month, there's still people coming on the night of garbage, going through my garbage paper by paper, trying to figure out whatever. I've been spied on, even up to recently. And the reason why I know this is because my neighbors all have cameras and they see in front of my place. And one of my neighbors says, Sue, I saw this happen once a couple of months ago, but I didn't do anything about it because I didn't think, it can happen. But now it's like multiple times, at least once a month. There's always two men, really nicely dressed with baseball caps, dressed dark with gloves on, going through all the garbage in front of your house, paper by paper. I had noticed once in a while there was a car parked in front of my house. I sent my neighbor by the lane, by the back. He crossed the street. He went against the street. I said, go look in the bottom of the window. If there's a little sticker that says Air Canada, then I know for sure this is Air Canada. And beyond and behold, there was that
Air Canada.
sticker. Yeah, and the reason I knew there was a sticker because every vehicle that could park at the Air Canada base at Côte Vertu, where Dorval Airport is, I don't call it Pierre-Éliott.
It's like an episode of the X-Files.
Yeah. That's it. You need that little sticker to park there. If not, you're going to be towed away. Okay.
So, we're coming up on 90 minutes, and I have to
wow,
run.
it goes really fast.
I was wondering if you could maybe. I know you're a private person, and I believe you said you don't take donations, but anything you can tell the audience where they can go follow you, learn more about you, anything to help you?
I'm on Facebook, but I use my Facebook more like for my personal family because not everybody's happy that I'm doing this. My last name is not Smith, and I don't want to hurt the careers and personal lives of people that have jobs in positions that they could be. Look, I have friends at Air Canada that are lifelong friends, more than 38 years, that are no longer my friends on Facebook because they don't want to be associated with me because they don't want to have problems at work. But they still call me, text me. We still go out for lunches and dinners, or they come and pick me up and do something nice with me because I have my issues. I have a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of nervousness. Even doing this today, it's been a week since you asked me to do this, and I'm having nightmares. It's not easy doing what I'm doing. It's just that I feel I must do this because most of the ones I talk with, Peyton, sorry, Peyton, I'm losing it. It's a little bit difficult when I start talking emotionally, and I try to not do that.
It's okay.
If nobody does it, who's going to do it? I didn't want to do this. I definitely didn't know how to put my face or my voice to anything. I didn't want to get involved in politics. I was more than happy to be a nobody in my private life, and I would be more than happy to go back to the life I had planned with my husband, my family, my friends. But I feel a strong commitment to not giving up because I feel, and I've also been told by many who've looked at my paperwork, that yes, I am the Pandora box that could open a legal precedent and create finally a good legal precedent for victims. Because what they are currently doing in our legal system is they're not applying the laws, they're applying jurisprudence. What is jurisprudence? What it means is that if a case that went in front of the courts, in front of a judge, the law says 1 + 1 = 2. So it should be simple. apply the law. But that's not what's happening. If a sneaky plaintiff or a sneaky lawyer manages to get a ruling that says 1 plus 1 equals 3, next time something similar comes into the courts, again, instead of the law of 1 plus 1 equals 2, now they're going to be applying 1 plus 1 equals 3. And that's what's called legal precedence or jurisprudence. And my case is in the Canley database. They used against me Béliveau Saint-Jacques and a McGill something. 2 cases that are completely irrelevant, have nothing in common with what I went through. But they use these precedents to then guide the judge or the commissioner or the whatever you want to call the person that's hearing a case. And they impose on this judge that this is what should be implied in the current case because this is what has been done in the past case. And this is also one of the reasons why the victims can't find lawyers. I tried to find a lawyer for almost 5 years. And it's almost out of pity, I think, that my current lawyer that's carrying my human rights case that is from Hamilton took me, is because other people of Air Canada, it's a pilot from BC that called that firm and told them about me. And they already had Kim on board as representing her. And she was from Toronto at the time. Now she lives in New Brunswick. She lost her house and her husband had to go back to work when he was retired. He was a truck driver. And they're living in their cottage in New Brunswick because of what they've been put through. And they do these things the way our legal system works. And now I've been explained that, but before I did not know that. Large corporations and the government pay retainers to these large corporate groups. And all these labor law firms are under retainer either by the unions or the corporations or by the government. So you as an individual, as an ordinary citizen seeking justice and representation, because you can't carry this case on your own without a lawyer, they're making sure that you cannot even find a lawyer that'll take you on because they're paying retainers to all these large firms.
It's a conflict of interest. Yeah.
Exactly. So if it's not an Air Canada conflict of interest, it's a Unifor conflict of interest. And some of these firms, I asked one of the lawyers, I said, have you ever pleaded a case for Unifor or CAW? They said, no, but we're on retainer. So I told this person because I was aware at the time. I said, so you're telling me because you're on retainer and you don't have no customers of CAW, Unifor, of Air Canada, you're still allowed to not take a customer that has a good case to take into the court law? He says, yeah, ma'am, I'm really sorry. I even got the chance to speak to Mr. Marc Bellemare, another ex-justice minister of the Quebec government.
I got to jump in, Sue. I'm late for another live
my
stream.
God,
I'm so sorry.
So sorry.
But I wanted, no, it's not your fault. It's mine for scheduling so close. I wanted to thank you so much for coming on. I'm very sorry for what you've gone through. And I just wanted to reiterate, I'm sure your mother would be very proud of what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I go, I want to let you know that I'm waiting for a response now. They have all the paperwork. The commission has a chance of hearing my case, but they're analyzing it. And I know the powers that be behind the scenes don't want my case to be heard. Just like Gloriane Blais, this ex-lawyer that got disbarred, that exposed corruption within the Quebec government and the unconstitutionality of the Quebec health law, that currently is carrying through an immense class action suit against all our government officials that were in place in 2020. All people are trying to do good in our system are being crushed, destroyed, attacked, you name it, everything's been done. I'm on X. That's where I have my free speech. I'm under my own name, Sue Sproule, SUESPROULE. I talk to anybody that wishes to talk to somebody because most victims don't have any allies. I often speak to people that I cannot help, but just to let them know that they're not alone. I even took a call of a lady on New Year's Eve at 10 at night that she's in Edmonton and she's struggling too, and she's a teacher. And I want to say to all these people out there, you are not alone. You need to find the courage in yourself to do what I'm doing and speak up. I know it's hard. I know it's humiliating. I would have preferred to be asked to be walk naked in the middle of my street than doing what I'm doing now. But if none of us speak up, none of us do it, nothing will change. And to my colleagues that are silent, and to all the union officials and union reps out there that are silent and complicit, to all the government workers out there that are silent and complicit, to all the law enforcement, to all the judges, to all the lawyers, to all the police officers, you have the power to make a difference. You may not want to do it right now and prefer getting your lovely paycheck, your lovely life and everything. But never forget, it's a form of prostitution and slavery that you've accepted to do. If you continue to accept it to do this, things are only going to get worse. And one day, you'll be the target. You'll lose your job. You'll lose your salary, and you will lose your pension. Because that's what's the plan coming for Canada. They're after the middle class. They don't want a middle class.
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't want people like us able to defend ourselves and having a voice. Our medias don't want us to have a voice. Our unions are making sure that stories like mine are not out there. And by having more people like you, Payman, by more people like Sheldon Yakachuk, by more people that are willing to sacrifice, because I know you lost as well. You had a good career as well. You probably made a lot more money in what you were doing before than what you're doing now. I know all that. I lost everything. As much as I was a strong, independent woman that didn't depend on anybody to survive and pay my bills, if I didn't have my husband, I'd be on the street, in a psychiatric ward, or in my sister's basement. And most people are struggling mentally. I'm one of the lucky ones. I thank God every day. I thank whoever's up there protecting me and guiding me. And I just want our Canada to change. We have evil criminals running our country, and the ones that are trying to come in, like Mark Carney and Freeland and Guilbeault and everybody else, they've all lined their pockets with our money, our tax dollars, are all roaming free, and our law enforcement, our RCMP, they're all compromised and they're not doing their jobs.
We'll get there one step at a time. Sue, I gotta run. I'm really sorry.
If you want to have me back on anytime, I'm willing to.
I will. I'll bring you back on. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye to the audience.
Thank you, Payman, and let's hope for a better future for the children, ours, yours, everybody's, and that our Canada can be brought back to the glory and what it was meant to be.
Amen.
Amen.
Take care.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.